Do you know that our enemy Satan wants to change your relationship with the Lord by using alternative medicine? Stay tuned to meet a man who's going to inform us of the devil's doorways. My name is Yvonne Shelton, and you're watching Urban Report. Hello and welcome to Urban Report. My guest today is Dr. Edwin Neues, physician, author, and exposer of the enemy's strategies through alternative medicine. Welcome to Urban Report, Dr. Neues. Yay!
Thank you. Happy to be with you.
Oh, I'm so happy that you're here. You know, I don't know, I think I mentioned this to you in a previous email and also a little bit earlier today that one of the books that you wrote, Spiritualistic Deceptions in Health and Healing, was pivotal in turning my life around because I was a practitioner of traditional Chinese medicine. I was board certified in it. And someone had sent me your book. I was doing acupuncture and TCM, traditional Chinese medicine. And someone sent me that book, Spiritualistic Deceptions in Health and Healing. And I kind of glossed over it. And I was like, no, this is a Western doctor who has it in for Eastern medicine. And I just kind of put it aside. And then someone else mentioned that book. And I thought to myself, Lord, are you trying to tell me something? So I took the book out, and this time I read it with an open heart. And I have to tell you that that was one of the main turnarounds for my life, to come out of Eastern medicine. And so thank you so much for what you're doing, exposing what's going on in alternative medicine, because there's so many things that we don't know about, that the average person doesn't understand. So we're going to talk about that today. Before we start, though, give us a little bit of your background, Dr. Neues. Where did you go to school? What did you study? That kind of thing.
I live in Western Oregon, near Portland, a little town called Forest Grove. And my collegiate time was at Walla Walla College. I graduated in 1955.
Whoa.
Then I went to Loma Linda University Medicine School. There I graduated in 59. I came to practice in the little town of Forest Grove, and there I was in general practice, and I continued for 40 years. I had a special interest in preventive medicine. And then about 1971, I developed an interest in the alternative therapies that were beginning to be recognized by people, and my patients began to ask about them. And so that initiated an interest to be able to give them a reasonable, honest, correct answer about those things, and I knew nothing. So that started a long period of study.
I see. And so as you began to study it, what were some of the things that you were finding as you began your search into some of these modalities? And we're going to talk about some of those modalities, but what did you begin to find?
Well, the only information that was available was primarily, do they work or do they not work? And so even the science studies that are done by the National Institute of Health were looking at, do they really accomplish something, or is this a placebo effect? And the different articles I could find went no deeper than whether they worked or they didn't work. When I would speak with physicians and others talking about this subject, that was basically the depth of it, nothing spiritually considered. And so there was very little to give you a solid background. There were some books written by Christian authors that placed in the so-called occult area, but they didn't explain why they would be placed into that. And so I was not satisfied. I had a lot of confusion for 20-some years that this went on, that I couldn't be sure. I knew that if I decided and said something that these were demonic or something of that nature, about that time, modern science would find an explanation of how they worked, and then I would have egg all across my face. And I think that's where a good many physicians were, that weren't quite convinced in them, but didn't want to say much because they were waiting for the studies that were being done by the researchers on these modalities.
It's
So
interesting.
that's kind of where I was for
Yes,
20 years.
it's interesting to me that modern science has embraced some of this. I know that when I was in acupuncture school, I would watch the news and they would talk about acupuncture and its effectiveness. And I was thinking to myself, wow, like they're really making my job easy, because they were actually promoting it as a science, as a medical treatment. And when I was in training, I did not realize the connection spiritually, the danger spiritually. So let's look at some of these alternative therapies that have spiritualistic implications. Pick one that's that you have
Meditation,
exposed. What is it?
yoga exercises,
Yes.
the Tai Chi. We would look at acupuncture. The foundation for all of these is a similar foundation. And at that point, I did not understand what that foundation was. And it was not till I received a book written by Ernest Steed, who gave me, in his little book, the foundation from which these different modalities arose, the understanding, the worldview behind them. And finally, my confusion began to dissipate, and then it was easy for me to come to a conclusion on what they were.
Yes. So what is the foundation? What is the foundation for these things?
Let's go back to the Garden of Eden. There was a tree of the knowledge of good and evil. And then when Eve came to the tree, the question was asked her, what did God say? Well, she said, God said, I would die if I partake of this tree. And then the answer comes back, no, you won't. That you will actually live, and that your eyes will be opened, and you'll be as gods. You'll see as gods. This particular lie was the beginning of the foundation. The tree of the knowledge of good and evil, and that you do not die, that you progress to become like a god, to become a god, is the foundation principles upon which these alternative therapies have their origin. Now, many people would begin to blink their eyes at that comment, but we have to go through some more explanation before they can understand how I arrive at that comment.
Yeah, that what people don't realize is the conflict of worldviews that these alternative modalities present. They just think, like yoga, it's just stretching. And I just recently wrote a book about yoga, which is being printed, but it's the idea that yoga is just stretching without looking at the root of each of these modalities. So the root of yoga is Hinduism, and Hinduism is incompatible with Christianity. What are some of the other modalities that you found that are incompatible with Christianity?
Well, let's look at, if you open the Bible, the first verse, in the first verse it says, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth.
Right.
The whole book is founded upon that statement. If that statement isn't true, the rest of the book is a fable. Now, the devil, when he wanted to counterfeit God's plan of salvation, he started with a false story of creation. And this false story, it has variables in various cultures, but primarily it says this: there was a great cosmic energy out through space. It had two sides to it, the yin and the yang, the good and the bad, the dark, the light, the evil, the good. This great energy, when eventually the dualism, the two sides, moved into oneness, then all creation came about. Everything, the universe, and as we looked then at the stars and the heavens, that became the macrocosm, and man was the microcosm. Being that everything created on earth and in the cosmos was supposedly as a result of this energy coming together, the two sides of the one energy which created, and a sound was supposedly admitted at that time too. This means that all substance is a part of that energy, and that energy is free of any living God, but they will refer to it as God. And so, therefore, I'm a part of that energy, and I am a God, or have the attributes of a God. Everything in it. This is Hinduism. Present-day Christianity has blended it to the saying, well, no, there is a living God, but he left a spark of his divinity in us. So each of us has a piece of divinity within. And what we need to do is to develop that divinity to a higher level. And in the nature worship, in the pagan civilization, which means the same thing, they take this concept and they learn that they can develop this energy, this force, this cosmic force, life force, has 100 different synonyms as names. One is a universal mind, and the most common one we hear that refers to this particular theoretic energy is chi, and the yin and the yang and the chi. But all right, people were now created, and they were created dualism, so within themselves they have this energy, but it is also on the good or the bad, or the yin and the yang. There's two aspects of it. And then their goal is to go on through life headed toward utopia, nirvana. But they are born and created with this problem of reincarnation. And their goal is to get out of reincarnation into nirvana. And as they move through time, they supposedly can do this by physical acts. The meditation, Eastern style meditation, the yoga exercises, these different physical activities are supposed to bring this dualism, this yin-yang inside, into eventually a oneness. When they can eventually, after it may take several lifetimes, to come to this oneness, then they obtain this immortality, they opt out of reincarnation, and can enter into nirvana at the body's death. And also they have, as I mentioned, they gained immortality at that point. This is the foundation of the pagan religions. And these physical methods by which they are attempting to correct or bring to oneness the dualism are the same physical things that are applied to health and healing. Why? Because health or illness is simply an imbalance of this yin and the yang, or the imbalance of this dualism within. And so the goal is to bring it into balance, to head toward utopia, godhood, and nirvana. They have taken these particular physical methods that are supposed to move one toward that utopia and apply them to health and healing. Because health and healing or illness is supposedly simply an imbalance. So in this philosophy, all disease and disorder is simply an unbalanced of this cosmic energy that has 100 different names, synonyms, and the most common we know of is, of course, chi on that part. But going back in earlier years, animal magnetism was one of the words. The universal mind, the self, a great variety of names. And each particular culture seemed to pick its own names to name this. So the center core of what we want to look at and think about is this belief in a permeating, flowing through of a cosmic energy that has a variety of names, and that when it is out of balance, this allows illness or improper state of our physical well-being.
Yes, and
So then the chore to bring back healing is to balance that energy.
Right. And that's what, when I was in school, that's what they were teaching, that everything has to be in balance. If there's too much, yang is hot, is heat energy, yin is cold. So if yin and yang are out of balance, then you have illness. So in order to bring health back to the patient, you have to balance yin and yang. And the qi also has to be in balance. You can have a qi deficiency, which, you have to raise the qi and stimulate the qi and all that. And so what we're finding and what you're saying, I think, is that in all of these, whether it's Taoism or Hinduism, whatever this Eastern mysticism modality is, the same dynamics are in play, bringing balance into the person's life. But what's interesting is the Bible doesn't teach a balance between good and evil. We're not to balance evil. We're not to have a balance between good and evil. We are to avoid, resist evil. So there are all of these contradictions spiritually between the Eastern medical modalities and Christianity. And so I hear what you're saying, and it's fascinating because, again, there has to be this, let me backtrack. When one investigates the root of these modalities, you find that the roots are Eastern mysticism, Eastern religion, and you cannot have Christianity and Eastern religion. You can't do what's called syncretism, balancing, adding a little bit of this. It's not a buffet, adding a little bit of this and a little bit of that, and making your own religion. So what I'm hearing you say is that this whole thing is out of sync with what the Bible teaches.
What was interesting about Ernest Steed's book is that it emphasized just what you said. All of the civilizations in the world are more bent upon balancing good and evil, getting it just right, where only the Bible is the one that says total separation from evil. It's not to be a part of the belief in the living God, the Creator God. And one of the most interesting things that eventually it dawned upon me as I studied this, that these modalities coming out of this Eastern worldview, Eastern thought, are actually being introduced into the West as a entering wedge to change the worldview of the Westerner. We think of them as coming in as science, but they're not real science, because science has not found that they are functioning under the rules of our chemistry and physics that we understand and know. It's a spiritual power that's behind them, because sometimes they do healing on there. But as they come as an entering wedge into the West, we find that it's simply a part of the evangelism of the Eastern religions to enter into the West to overturn the Judeo-Christian worldview. And that was quite an astounding thing when I finally realized. And one of the things that helped me realize that, the book The Aquarian Conspiracy by Marilyn Ferguson, written in 1980, which is considered sort of the Bible for the New Age movement, for the progressive movement, it states in there the reason they promote these healing therapies because they are the most effective way of altering that worldview, to get the Western Judeo-Christian worldview kind of in the background and bring in and introduce the East, and people, if they seem like they have improved from the therapies, now are pretty much convinced that this is truth, where it is totally mystical.
Yes, that is so true. It is an entering wedge. That just like health, the health message is an entering wedge for the gospel. So Eastern modalities are an entering wedge for adopting and adapting these other philosophies. There's a study done, a couple of studies that I can allude to. One is 2016 and one is 2017, where they found that practicing yoga over a period of time, the initial reason or rationale for yoga initially was exercise and stress reduction, but it became spirituality over time because people began to experience certain things through the practice of yoga that actually changed their philosophy. So the idea is continued practice makes one's values change. And that was what you just said. It's basically an entering wedge for Eastern philosophy. You begin to be more open to these other ideas that are contrary to Scripture.
Many people say, well, I can partake of those and totally avoid any of that because I will not set my mind to that. But they're fooling themselves.
That's right.
Those that are the most expert in the long term in here will tell us that influence comes whether you want it or not. It's insidious. You don't realize it. And one of the first things that I notice in it is they begin to argue back how good of that which they have chosen is. They don't want to even investigate that it might be something other than what they would choose to participate in. So that's one of the first things. But I've read by people that have been their whole lifetime in that and then became Christians, outlined that these changes, let's say yoga exercise, this person was talking about, that you can do all of those things, but the mind is being imperceptibly invaded with thoughts, and your mind opens up to accept them. I think of one of my favorite authors mentioning the moment we begin to investigate the devil's wiles, his influence is over us. The moment we begin to investigate it, his influence is upon us. Wow. And this is what happens, and people think they're safe, they're strong, that can't affect them. They fool themselves.
Yes, that is so true. But I can't believe our time is wrapping up this quickly. Tell us a bit about your latest book. What's the title, and tell us what's in it?
The book is called Exposing Spiritualistic Practices in Healing. It's simply an enlargement of the first book, which was Spiritualistic Deceptions in Health and Healing. This one is, let me back up. On the first book, I found I had not covered enough subjects, and some subjects not enough information to really deal with it, so that stimulated me to put the second book. It's more than a second edition. It's many chapters more, a large appendix in it, and it has probably 850 or so references. So I did a tremendous amount of research over many years. It took me 3 years to actually put it in print, to write it down. And this has been a book that covers most of the most frequently used and popular therapies. But at the beginning of the book, I spend a couple of chapters outlining what I spoke of earlier about this particular supposedly worldwide and energy that goes through everything. That's the reason we now hear about energy medicine. People are dealing with that subject on that part. This book has been translated into Spanish now. I just received today an email from India where it has been translated into Telugu, there's 300 million people in southern India that speak Telugu. Have a Russian copy on that. And so this book is on internet or on the Amazon and available there. I checked it the other day, and they have there the hard copy, $30-some, but just one little line below says something about softcover. You click on that, and you find it's like $13 or $14. But they scare people away with that hardcover price on there. Another thing that I'd like people to know about is a website that has been about less than 2 years old, this particular one. It's healthandspirituality.info. Healthandspirituality.info. And there's 2,700 pages in that exposing a great variety of things, not even in the book.
Are you saying help, H-E-L-P, or health?
Health, like my good health.
Oh, health, yes. Okay. Health and spirituality.
Yes, .info. And there you can find a vast number of things. You can click on links that will give you, bring you to YouTube, where we have a lot of seminars that have given on that sort of thing. There is also a place people can sign up, and about every 3 to 4 weeks I send out what I call a dispatch, be another article on another aspect of a subject, or somebody may have written in and asked a question, want it researched and explained, and I send it back to everybody on the network. So everybody is invited to join that, to share with everybody you know the knowledge of the address for that website. I've done this primarily to spread the message and give warning. 2 years ago, I realized that after 20 years of doing seminars and teaching this subject, I wasn't making much headway. It seemed like the church audiences were deeper into it than they were before. So I invited 4 other individuals to join with me, and we formed this little group called Health and Spirituality.
And we have 30 seconds. We have 30 seconds, so tell us real quick what happened.
And so they had been doing what I've been doing, and they felt they were the only ones out there doing it also. So we joined together and formed this website to share with the world, hopefully be more effective.
Oh, thank you so much. Thank you for all that you're doing, and thank you for being with us. Join us next time, because you know what? It just wouldn't be the same without you.